Time. Sicily Kariuki is here, former CS Water, Sanitation and Irrigation, also former Health CS. Thank you so much for making time. Dr. Danvas Makori, Commissioner NCIC, asante sana for making time. And Kipruta Rapkirwa, former Agriculture Minister. Thank you very much for making time. So, Prof, I'll start with you. There is a growing perception that this is the most arrogant government administration by Kenyans. Is this true?
That's not true. Probably you believe it yourself. Because if you are made up of, if you wake up every morning and everything you say about government is negative, you only see the negative side and you say, okay, you hinge on, you hold on some wave of some small mistake, some small hitch, and you say, this is not correct. You will always see this disharmony. Even in a family, there could be some people talking at crossroads, they don't agree.
Yeah.
In government also, there are certain people who have positions, but when it comes to the general position of administration and serving the people, we speak with one voice.
So how am I the one saying this, Prof, when the Deputy President himself regarding Gachagua said this is akin to talking down on Kenyans? How is that?
No, the Deputy President is addressing a specific situation. And even the situation that the Deputy President is talking about is not a general ailment for, across government. All of us, including myself, the President calls us several times to tell us many things where we have not done the right thing. He talks to us. The Deputy President does the same. In cases like PSS, even cabinet secretaries call on us, they talk to us, many things that the public doesn't come to hear about it. So the Deputy President is talking about a specific case, but that does not mean that the government is speaking at growth.
So when Moses Kuria asks Kenyans to dig their own well, is that an arrogant statement?
I mean, Trevor, and this is the point I'm telling you, and I have some advisory even to the media house. Don't always talk about negative things. You look at Moses Kuria, and when he says something, you say the government. He's a cabinet secretary, and he's an adult. If Moses Kuria today made a statement that you think needs an explanation, you don't call a government PS or a government minister and ask him to explain what Moses Kuria is. If you are a well-trained journalist, you must call Moses Kuria and ask, what did you mean by ABCD? But to make a generalization and hide away from Moses Kuria, he hasn't given you audience. If he hasn't, you ask why. But if he gives you an audience, if Kisiangani today spoke about something that is a bit offensive to the public, you call Kisiangani and ask Kisiangani, what is it that you said and what you meant? But this generalization, because Moses Kuria has made a statement, and then you say this government is collapsing and it's generalizing, you start shouting about fires which are not there. It's not fair.
But Kisiangani, I have you here because this falls squarely in your docket. Should there have been a more structured way of communicating government policy or even intervention on serious matters?
Yes,
this is really your docket.
Yes, this is my docket. But I'm talking about a specific case which involves Moses Kuria or any other cabinet.
Are you disappointed by what he said?
I mean, I was not there in the first incident. I saw some clips, some media coverage. I have a liberty to ask Moses Kuria whether he said, but you must know that I can't supervise Moses Kuria. Moses Kuria is a cabinet secretary, and these are appointees of the president. So for you as a media house, what you do, call Moses Kuria, call the appointing authority to get clarification. But to ask me to make an opinion about him when you can reach him, what I think is not important, and I think I don't speak for everybody in the cabinet I'm not supervising anybody. I'm telling you that what you need to appreciate, government is made up of human beings. They are not perfect people. So occasionally we can make mistakes as individuals. And when we make mistakes as individuals, it doesn't become a generalization. And you'll forgive me, Trevor, the reason why I'm making this statement is not because I want to be unfair to you or rude to you. I'm just pointing out a fact that there is a preoccupation, especially with certain people in this country, including probably your media house, to argue that if you have given yourself a duty to only look for the wrong side of things. When they happen badly, that is when you blow up. But when you see some positive things, you don't ask. So for Moses Kuria's case, Call Moses Kuria tomorrow and ask him. But in terms of whether government is speaking from one voice, in terms of communication, the government knows what it is doing, and this small disagreements will be there, but there is nothing like we want to communicate. And I'm just worried because at the level that we are talking, at what point, Trevor, this is very critical, did you think that this government should communicate in the way you want? At what time did you become so patriotic and so happy about this government that you can now ask they should communicate in a particular way?
It's not us who are asking, it's the people who put you power. You are accountable to them. No, when they say that there's a pressure in terms of cost of living and you tell them to dig their own wells, that's a member of the executive. It's one of your own.
You spoke.
Just the same way you want us to apportion when you do good things and you do bad things. No. So we are asking you because you're accountable to Kenya.
Yes, you are talking about communication strategy, which is the one I'm addressing, and you say it lies in my docket. That's a fact. But what I'm saying is, what do you think is the best communication strategy according to you? That you have suddenly become so friendly now, you have a communication strategy on which to advise government. Even when we were involved in campaign, you kept saying that this government, these people don't have a good communication strategy, and you only saw the wrong side of things. So what I would like you to do is, as a Kenyan, if probably you are concerned certain things are not right, in fact, isolate something that has irritated you and get clarification from the people who are speaking, but don't generalize that whatever is happening is therefore the government or the Ruto administration is collapsing. If you do that, you cause some kind of disharmony across the country to think that the government is on fire when that is not completely correct. Okay. And I think when we delve into specific areas of what the government has,
we'll talk about that in just a
bit. You will
understand.
I will clarify where you think the communication has been wrong. I will tell you that it has been right.
We'll talk about that in just a bit, but let me bring in Honorable Sicily Kariuki on this. How should CSs express themselves, Honorable Sicily, when you were there yourself? Is there a code that guides CSs on speaking? Because the professor is talking about us gauging, apportioning individual blame, but how do we decide when a CS is speaking as a CS and when he's speaking as our own person?
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you for having me in this with these great panelists. Perhaps I wanted to propose from where I speak. I do not wish to be confined to an individual case, i.e. the current issue against, between Honorable Moses Kuria and the emotions and what have you, because I think that when you say government, tone and language, that's the art of communication we are looking at. I think we are looking at leadership. Government is you, me, them, and everyone else. So if we confine this evening conversation to one case or two cases, I think it will be too little for Kenyans. Number two, I think that we need to interrogate this evening, why are Kenyans so emotive because of the occurrences or the statements that have been made in the last few days? So we must dig a little bit deeper to ask ourselves why. Is it just because a statement was made? Is it because we are unhappy? Or is it because of what the PS is telling us here, that you as a media house are, oriented to bring things in a certain manner, which is a brand I think that you need to also shake off, because we need these platforms. Me and these leaders around here, we need these platforms to be able to express ourselves on behalf of the 50 million Kenyans who will not have the privilege of being invited to come and sit here. And number three, as a principle, I think that, and this is not necessarily addressing or responding to what the PS has said, one fly messes up the soup in a whole pot. So when one individual in the executive projects, or two or three projects, communication in a certain way, really, if it's in a pot of soup, it then follows that soup is not good for anyone. So I think cabinet or the executive, the way you wanted us to frame this evening's conversation, is a collective of individuals at different levels, horizontal and also vertical. So when a handful of them do not kind of project the collective intentions of the executive, then we are bound to be left with questions of, is it really then that? Is that then the collective, or is it really the individual? And it becomes very difficult then to exonerate an individual out of that collective responsibility. We are told on the dispatches or the job description that you get as a cabinet minister or a PS or even a CEO at that level, the decision you make bind executive as a collective. So when you voice, when you show up in a certain manner, it is fair for you to know you're speaking or projecting for everyone else. So it is important that you wear that in your mind. Trevor, the last time you hosted me, I wasn't a certified emotional intelligence practitioner. I'm one now. So my conversations will be rotating around leadership and how leadership projects from a point of emotional intelligence, particularly because of the people, the 50 million people who you've been trusted to carry.
Okay. But Makori, are you concerned as NCIC when these emotive statements come through? And even the Deputy President himself had mentioned something about this a country of shareholders. There are those who have shares, there are those who have a lot, there are those who don't have. But NCIC has not said a thing.
How do you know we have not said a thing?
Because we are here. I've been on broadcast. I haven't heard you say anything. Have you condemned it? Do you want to condemn it even now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Let me first of all dovetail on the Deputy President's statement that is current now, which he said he questioned the statements to talking down on Kenyans. So I'm going to quote the Constitution, the Bible, just to then I can go to what you're saying. Timothy was told to be an example as a young leader in speech, in conduct, in love. And for the first thing was in speech. And in our Constitution, we are told, it is very clear that our bosses are the Kenyans. So we as state officers, all of us have been state officers one time, our true bosses are the Kenyan people. So I think in training, you don't talk to your boss the way you want to. You are very careful. All of us have been saying, you're very careful how you talk to your boss, otherwise you'll be fired very easily. So I agree with the Deputy President in what he has said today in regards to that. I think we must, once a mistake has been made, it's good to acknowledge it has been made, but there's a larger context to it and a broader context to it. Of course, we know the country we are in, free speech is guaranteed in our Constitution, but there's a limit to it. The question that is there is the issue of perception. There's the issue of ethics in terms of what you talk as leaders, the issue of Chapter 6 of the Constitution in terms of who you are as a leader and how you project yourself. And that's a broader question, I think, that comes to question in mind. And I think this is not a political question, and let's not even make it, because I think Kenyans from Lodwar to Lamu, from Mandera to Kajiado are affected by certain issues. And when your boss asks you certain questions, it is prudent, and it's not even a factor of humility, it's just prudent and the right thing to answer your bosses and explain to your bosses why certain things are here. And I think for us as a commission, I can tell you we've had these private conversations with a key number of people. But in reality, Trevor, let's be very frank also. See, not everything gets to our purview as a commission. You know, for us, there's a limit to the threshold to what we handle. So certain things can be incendiary, can be offensive. That is not really our purview per se. So that's a conversation I think we need to have as a country and as leadership, but it's not something for me I can say as a commission that is our responsibility. So let me, one of the things I think we can see in this example is good to always stick to your lane, comment on matters that really within your lane, otherwise you get in trouble like we've seen. All right,
Honorable Kiro, I have to take a quick break here, but you've been in the executive before. What is the agreed upon code of conduct, and the statements you've had, are they becoming of a member of the executive?
Yeah, Trevor, thank you so much for this opportunity, and also let me join my colleagues in saying a number of things. One, we are not saying it because we do not like the current administration. We are saying it because there is a standard way of communication. The last time I knew, when we were in cabinet, there is what Sicily Kariuki has said, collective responsibility. Collective responsibility to the extent of ensuring that you cover each other's tracks. But if you are minister in charge of a certain portfolio, that is the area that you need to concentrate. I would have expected this administration, because they have seasoned people who know the government better perhaps than me, for ministers not to be overzealous or commenting on issues that is not within their docket. That is a better way of communicating, in the sense that if, let's say, you are in charge of certain portfolio, you have the latitude of freedom to get information from your officers. So by the time you are making a statement, you are making on the basis of this is a position the government does understand. The second issue is the challenge of trying to speak from all directions without coordinated effort. You would expect, like when we had the problem of blackout, when there was the issue of maize importation, when there was a problem of many things that have happened in this society, is that the cabinet is supposed to be a clearinghouse for any decisions that are made by the government, and ministers will pronounce the position that has been cleared at the cabinet level.
Yeah.
For example, if there is a matter to do with education and affecting an institution within the Ministry of Agriculture and affecting dispersal of resources, a cabinet memo is prepared by the three ministers.
Yeah. Minister
for Education, Minister for Agriculture, Minister for Finance, and at times internal security, because they may need coordination from internal security. So that when that position is taken, it is clear in the cabinet memo that who is going to take action.
Yeah.
So that we know the action to be taken by the Minister of Finance is to seek resources for purposes of funding certain government projects. Okay. Minister for Agriculture is to let go the institution, for example, Pan Institute, Kabianga Institute. I had to let go as minister for purposes of ensuring that it goes now to the Ministry of Higher Education as a constituent college of one of the universities. And finally, that coordination is very important. And it is processed by the officers in the ministry. By the time it comes to the minister, it is clear. But the way I see the current administration, each minister wakes up in the morning, says anything as if they are talking about generally anything and everything within the government.
Okay. I have to take a quick break here. All right, thank you for staying with us. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. We're talking about the government's tone and language. And Prof, you were saying that at this particular point, we can't apportion blame to an individual and essentially include the whole cabinet into it. But how do we then differentiate between a cabinet secretary speaking as his own person and him speaking as a member of the executive?
Context.
What context, bro?
When people, if
do you decide that now?
Like if I'm watching football, and I'm addressing people, my local people in my mother language, or just enjoying myself at some place where there's an art exhibition, I can say some things. I'm free to say some things, but there's also the official capacity in which I speak. And then you can say, this person was just, if I have a drink with you with the tea, I mean, taking tea with a couple of other people, we can share some chat and I can be a bit loose. I can say a few things. But there can be a context. There could be a context where it looks a little official and where you cannot just say things the way you want. So when you are a cabinet secretary, it doesn't mean that when you are in your house, you also behave like a cabinet secretary. When you are among friends, you are like a cabinet secretary. I sometimes have people that I grew up with and they're my age mates. When I meet them, there could be a big crowd. They see me, they say, you know, you are just our age mate. Then they tell me, mambo imepanda hii, you know, petroleum has gone up. You people, what are you doing in government? Then I tell them, simuende mujinyonge. I could say that like that, but it doesn't look official. They don't take any exception. So there is always a part of you that is informal. But there is also a part of you that is formal. So what we in government, especially people serving in government, should be careful about, which is a fact, is to look at the context in which we are speaking, the audience we are addressing, and determine whether that audience is fit for the messages we are passing or it is not. If it is not fit for that message, don't pass it. So the concern about us having message discipline and knowing where to take the message is not out of context. It's correct. So you have to judge people according to the context in which if Moses Kuria or anybody else in government calls a meeting and you are seated between two penderas and then you start saying things, those ones are official and you cannot run away with it. But when you get into the field, sometimes people get informal and they don't know how to differentiate. So they keep crossing.
Do you have guidelines like what Honorable Sicily Kariuki was saying? In their time, they were, even Honorable Kirwa said that there has to be structured communication.
There are guidelines. Government doesn't operate without guidelines. We know, everybody knows what to do. But you have seen, this is not the pressure of any member of this cabinet or other cabinets, people go into public space. Even during campaigns, you have seen some people crossing the line and even regretting about that crossing the line. So things happen.
Okay.
There is the informal part. I think the challenge we have in this country is the same challenge that even parents have with their children. What do you say when the children are there? What do you say when the children are not there? When you go to address school kids, what do you say? So people know what to do.
Okay.
And that's why I was telling you, the best way to approach this, if, for example, Kisiangani today crossed the line, what do you think crossing the line? Ask Kisiangani, did you know that you had crossed the line? But don't now say, because Kisiangani has said this, so Sicily also thinks the same, or probably Kipruto Kirwa thinks the same.
Okay.
Sometimes these things happen. So my concern with you, Trevor, is that you overplay them and you think that is a general rule in the government to be disorganized. It's not true.
All right. Honorable Kariuki, you said that you're now focusing on emotional intelligence. Now, are Kenyans being sensitive unnecessarily due to the prevailing hard circumstances?
I really don't think so, Trevor. I don't think that Kenyans are being oversensitive. I think that it is tough. If you've been to the ground, Mambo si is sour. You know, the cost of living has gone through the roof. That we know, even sitting here, because the last time I remember going to a pump station, I fueled and used money that I had never used in my life ever since, and I'm not very young. The cost of basic foodstuff, which of course was pushed around because of the rain situation that we had, the drought situation that we had, and I don't think the prices have come back, you know, to where they would be even after the rains. So really, and then you look at what the dollar, the shilling and the dollar depreciation and what that is having for an impact. Then you look at the issues of joblessness and what the youth are also saying. So I really don't think Kenyans are being oversensitive, but I do think that what Kenyans did, the minute they voted the current government in office, the promises which were made on top of promises, on top of promises, on top of promises, they are looking to see how many of those promises really have been fulfilled. Now, as if it's not bad enough that several of them have not been fulfilled, you come and kind of take the nail and you drive it through the skull and you show an attitude of mtadu. Yeah. Now, what we are lacking is something called empathy, in emotional intel. Any communication to people who are hurting or are sensitive or are in sheer want, what they are asking for is, please feel us. Now, we are asking of you, PS and your colleagues, begin to be more empathetic. Feel what Kenyans are feeling. What, supposing it was you, how would you like to be treated? What kind of communication would you like to come through to you? And making a mistake is all right. Repeating a mistake is a problem. So the minute as a leader you actually voice something which is not good to the ears of the people who put you in office, it is not a mistake to come back and say to them, you know what, that was you know, not the intention. Yeah. That is not what I intended. I never wanted to hurt you. What I really meant were 1, 2, 3. There are 3 basic keys in any communication from a leader that should be observed. Acknowledge there is a problem, because if fuel or the cost of living is what it is today, acknowledge that is a taste and is a problem. But on the other hand, don't tell us, you know, take the rope and go hang, if that, you know, to be more figurative. Tell us, while we appreciate this is a problem, we feel you. Yeah. As a leadership, we feel you. And that to the extent possible, even though we may not be able to drive the prices down at this point in time, we are feeling you. You know what that does? Yeah. You engage with the population immediately, and they see that you're one of them. Yeah. But when you project your high-headedness in the language, the body language, the gestures, mutadu, you know, it is not fair. So Kenyans are not being sensitive. Number 3 key for any leader communicating to people who are in sheer want is also to say, these are the actions I will be taking, and hopefully in the midterm, in the longer term, we will have resolved. And therefore bear with us. Okay. It removes nothing from you as a leader, doesn't get you from the office, doesn't get you from more, you know, and then you are able now to move as a collective or as a unit. Okay. Kenyans come alongside you. I am just wondering, with the kind of what you're calling arrogance, but what for me looks like lacking in emotional intelligence to carry your population. whether we are now also saying we will have a better chance again at convincing Kenyans. Because it's okay to have promised. I've been to this studio before and have said, promising you're going to drive the cost of living down in 100 days is a campaign gimmick. Nowhere did it ever happen, because it will never happen. But you owe Kenyans to come back to them and say, while we projected, while we are not in office, that 100 days will have done X, Y, Z, mambo kwa ground any different. It will be very tough for us. And these are the reasons, but we feel you. You completely disarm them. But what has happened now, ukipeleka kiburi mbele, wananchi now, wanaskuma, that is why mishale iko all over the place. So again, I'm just saying, for any leader, and I'm not speaking about a government leader, I'm speaking about you, I'm speaking about me, I'm speaking about my former boss, Arap Kirwa here, emotional intelligence, which allows you to be so aware of yourself and consequences of how you respond and relate with others. It is a very simple art.
Prof, I see you want to respond to what Sicily is saying, but there's also a lot of concern from Kenyans saying that, first of all, there's no context to what Moses Kuria was saying. He calls for a presser as a CS. He was not in his house. He was not in a personal event. This was an official function. Kisiangani is being not honest. I don't want to use the words that they're using here. He was not filmed at an informal event. It was not in his house with his friends. It was not at a football event. How do we know he was not speaking as government? The government has not condemned
We haven't made Moses Kuria the topic.
You
talked about whether there are rules in government on how people behave. So I was responding to your general question. Remember, I told you that I don't supervise the cabinet secretary. And I said, in general sense, whether things are offensive, utterances are offensive or not, sometimes it depends on context. But I was not defending Moses Kuria. I don't have that capacity. And I said I don't have an opinion for now. So the Kenyans who are expressing that, let them just kindly understand that I'm not dealing with a specific Moses Kuria situation. We're talking about communication and whether you should speak in this particular direction, if you are a PS or a CS, or not. I say it depends on context, and some context can cross other contexts as well. But just to quickly make some contribution to what the CS is talking about, I think she's perfectly right to say that when people are suffering, they need some kind of empathy. That's a fact. But also, you see, the chief communicator of the message, the chief communicator in this country of the message is the president. I have not seen anybody quote a situation where the president has spoken in a way that he doesn't care about the people. Every other day on weekends, from Thursday to probably another week on Tuesday or Wednesday, the president is in the villages, talking to people, sharing their concerns, and even telling them about solutions to come. If you look at the recent past, the president has been in Nyanza, he has been in Mount Kenya region, talking to people and listening to them when they talk about roads which are impassable, and then he responds with solutions. And then if you look at the general comments the president has made repeatedly as the chief communicator, the chief messenger in this country, he has also talked about the international concerns where oil prices actually, like now, you know, the crisis of oil prices is not a Kenyan issue. In fact, you know very well that because of the embargo that was placed on Russia, because of the Ukraine war, Russian oil has been denied access to the world market. And as a result of that embargo, about 3.6 billion barrels of oil cannot enter the market. In response, the OPEC countries, the oil-producing countries, have responded by saying, now we have a chance to raise the prices of oil. What they have done, they have cut down on production. And it is coming at a wrong time when the Northern Hemisphere is about to start their winter, and they burn the heat oils such as kerosene and diesel are also now in high demand. Now that has an impact on world economies. If you make a comparison and you check what is happening across the region, especially in the African continent, you will realize that our prices, the United States alone, in terms of super oils, their super oil is about 223 Kenya shillings. we are at 211. And their diesel is 235, we are at 200. Now, in this region, especially Zambia, the price of oil in Zambia is 209.70 cents. And of course, of super.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the price of diesel is 191.
Yeah.
Uganda is 216 Kenya shilling.
Okay.
Now, in terms of comparison, Trevor, if you are patient with me,
yeah,
you realize that we are not far off. It is not a Kenyan problem. And so, in addition to that, so that you give somebody else a chance to speak,
yeah,
you have also to understand that the economy that has a problem such as Kenya,
yeah,
doesn't just become problematic overnight.
Okay.
It is an economy which has gone through certain stages, and we have been experiencing. The CS has just alluded to some of the things we have gone through. So to pin all these things to William Ruto's administration and think that William Ruto has a solution overnight and forget about our recent history, how this economy was destroyed by people who are now calling on the president to improve the economy overnight.
Yeah. And
that is
let me bring in Kiru on this. And this is the other concern that Kenyans are having. Is it enough to compare our suffering to the whole world and say that everybody else is suffering compared to other economies that some of them are landlocked, like Uganda is, for example,
well,
so the prices will be more? Okay. Is it enough for government to keep blaming the previous administration?
I don't know, because you see now it's going to be dialogue between us and the good professor. Because the last time I knew, when we took over the economy of this country in 2003, it was growing negatively. But in 5 years, we were able to move up to 6.8. My sector contributing substantial amount of that. Number two, it is not true. The crude oil prices in dollars are lower than they were in 2022. And yet, fuel now is more expensive. What has really spiked the price of oil is the fact that the dollar has misbehaved here in Kenya. And that you cannot blame on the previous administration. The last time I knew, and this is something I can advise Professor, is that don't spend a lot of time telling us how other people did not do what you are doing. Do what you are doing and tell us what you are doing now. Blaming it on the previous regime is just trying to play the same song that you played during the campaigns and made a lot of promises. Some of them were not true. For example, nobody has told you not to give us guaranteed minimum returns on farming, which is a key factor in Trans Nzoia and Bungoma, where the good professor comes from. Number two, the promises that you made, it is good to say, yes, we made 1,800 promises, but practically this is what we can do in the next 5 years, given the reasons Sicily Kariuki has given. Number three, you can win an election through propaganda, but you cannot sustain yourself in government through propaganda. Finally, I think, Trevor, it is good for us to focus on areas of leadership.
Yeah.
And the last time I knew, as a student of leadership, is that leadership is the capacity to listen to even the simplest of voices, and also the wisdom to integrate that information coming from that person. But when you get into defensive mode and telling us that this is a problem that was started by the previous regime, you are not solving the problem.
Okay.
We are addressing Kenyans now. And so that I don't forget, because I may not get enough time, is to thank Sicily Kariuki. She got the first job as my officer in the Ministry of Agriculture through me, having done the interview. And I realized she has already done better.
Yeah.
Listening to her, I think if we were in the same ministry, she would be doing better than me.
Okay, Makori, what is the best way forward now?
The best way forward, thank you. First of all, I'm glad I've maintained my peace and spoken the less. For a reason. First of all, in government, when your seniors are there, you listen to them. These are all by seniors in government, so it's good just to listen, and it's a practice that we know very well. I think one of the way forward is, of course, there is a gap in communication, as we can see. And in any organization, there's strengths and weaknesses in terms of people and personalities and the personnel. So the people who are good at certain things, the people who are not good at certain things. It's to leverage, to be successful, you need to leverage on strengths and minimize on weaknesses. Yeah. So the people who should not the people who should be in the forefront in terms of communication. I think the gap that has been there for a while, I think once the government spokesperson is appointed, I think that will be mitigated, because there will be more structured communication. and centralized communication. I think that would be a good thing. That's one of I think what they fall in terms of overall communication, even in strategy. Because if you don't do that, we'll be still in the same problem as you alluded to. I think secondly also is just a responsibility. We need to remind ourselves, all of us have been given leadership positions in one time or another, that we are custodians of these positions. Okay, first of all, it's a God-given responsibility, and we're custodians of it. Yeah, so we ought to always remind ourselves that and be consistent in our speech, in our conduct all the time. Maintain that posture in humility, because that's our constitution as it is. It is about the conduct we ought to conduct ourselves as state officers and public officers. We are public servants. The key word there is servants. Sisi ni watumishi wa umma. Yeah, so we serve the people of Kenya. We should never forget that. So even in how we approach that, I think it will be helpful. I think in finishing, a mark of a good leader is one who listens. Also, I think I agree with my good peers here. I think one of the things the president is also very good at is listening, and he has a way of messaging his message and the narration to resonate with the Kenyans. He has done that. But also there's a point that both the CS and PS have said, and I'll close with that, in this context, that you see, there's many people, the government is big, they can all attest to it, but government is a humongous bureaucracy. Yeah. And it is hard to control everything and everyone. And many people are doing very good things. So the one person is spoiling for so many people. So we should always focus on the big picture. And as Madam CS says, now it's that fly that is spoiling the soup that is the problem. So let's focus on the soup then, you understand? And the big scheme. I'm always a big fan of what's the big picture. Yeah. Yeah, we have challenges as a nation. We have serious challenges and headwinds are facing us. So for us is to pull together as a country, and I know the president will be very consistent in his messaging, and I know he knows the challenges that we face, and hopefully we'll have a practical solution sooner than later. Okay, I have to close now, but I see you still have some few. Yes, 1 minute.
Give him a chance to respond to me.
Okay.
So allow me to respond to him.
Okay, 30 seconds.
Prof, I want to agree with almost everything. Yeah. Except the notion that the chief communicator is the president of this republic. The reason there is an executive and there is a cabinet is because the president is one against 50 million people. It isn't practical that he can be the one discerning, breaking down, and communicating. Okay. The reason the cabinet that he selects, appoints, and puts in office is to be his principal assistant, whether it is in policy, whether it's in the communication, whether it is in how you show up to the Kenyans. So it isn't possible that we can sit here and wait for President William Ruto to be the one breaking it down and giving it to us. Okay. It is expected anybody that is holding a leadership position in the KK government needs to read the lips, the intentions, the body language of their boss and communicate ahead of him in a manner that would please him in as far as serving Kenyans is concerned and carrying Kenyans along. Okay. So it isn't possible we can sit here and wait for him to go to Bungoma, go to Embu and go to Nyandarua for us to listen to what the government is doing. Okay. Then it would mean he doesn't need a cabinet, doesn't it? He doesn't need a deputy. So Prof, hello, you are my good friend. So
yes, we have been friends for a long time.
Agree, the burden cannot be shouldered by one gentleman. When he has a cabinet, then what he needs to do, let them go home tomorrow. Then we can be waiting for communication from one gentleman. Okay. So it's not practical. Again, I'm coming and saying we are oversimplifying the emotional state of Kenyans. They are feeling taken for granted. Because when we come and simplify such a serious issue here, we should be doing exactly what my former boss says. We promised 1, 2, 3 up to Z. We've come in, tumekuta mambo kwa ground ni different. So this is how we intend to respond. They are holding a social contract signed by the president and his deputy with 50 million Kenyans. The social contract can be renegotiated with humility, with honesty, with vulnerability, with sensitivity. And Kenyans are normal human beings. They know if the dollar is playing up, if they are told the reason is playing up. Okay. We've seen the way the weather has treated us. We've seen the efforts, positive efforts, that the government of the day has put in place, including these overdrumming, the climate change, and its impact. Kenyans are not deaf. They are not dumb. They have seen. But please put them around again and say, the same way we convince them that they can give you the vote, come and say, this is where we are at, this is a problem statement. This, we feel you, to now feel. But this is how we are going to move together to stabilize the ship. But to come and say it's about President William Ruto, no. Asha.
Prof, 30 seconds.
Yes, I think could be some little misunderstanding. The reason why I raised the question of exactly what she has stated. The chief communicator is the president. So all of us have a duty to see what the chief communicator is doing. That is the context which I mentioned. I didn't say he should communicate alone. So, and I said earlier on that people might veer off the line, but that does not represent what this government is all about. This government is about humility, and we have done it. But just to add something small, I think, is it true that this government has done nothing? No. Is it true that it has not achieved most of the things, some of the things it had promised? That's not true. I'll give you just one specific example, which is in my backyard, and Mheshimiwa Kirwa knows that. If you go to Bungoma, Trans Nzoia now, the maize harvest is huge, and this Mheshimiwa Kirwa is not. While some people in Nairobi are doing maandamano in the streets, actually, many of my people in Bungoma, Kakamega, Busia, and many of our kinsmen in Rift Valley, where Kipruto Kirwa, my brother, comes from, were doing maandamano on the farms. And the result of it is, right now, the price of maize, the 2-kilogram maize, has come down in a way you can't believe. If that is not a drop in the cost of living, we were expected, after this government came into power, 2 months, 3 months after our friends who had messed up the country, they expected that we must bring down the cost of food. What we were doing, Trevor, is that we were borrowing, taking our foreign exchange to subsidize the economies of Malawi and Zambia by taking that money to buy maize from there. Now, you have maize here, and in my place now, it is so cheap. It doesn't mean anything. And that is the reason why I started by telling you this. If your preoccupation is you have not graduated beyond the election, and you think a Saturday candidate should have one election, it doesn't matter how much Ruto does good things. It doesn't matter. You will always look for the time when there is some mistake and you were playing.
Prof, many people are saying you have not graduated from the election. It's not about the media. It's about you who won the election. At what point do you acknowledge that you've won?
Yes, I'm telling you. I've told you about the food. I'm giving you the example of the food production. The maandamano that people in Mount Kenya did on the farms has given rise to a lot of food. The maandamano people did on the farms in Rift Valley has given rise to a lot of food. The maandamano people did on the farms in Western has given rise to food. And it's about 7 months, because you can't plant maize today and you get you reap. So there are people seated around Nairobi, and they don't have the heartbeat of the villages. All through, when you go to the villages right now, the message the president is getting at the government is that your message on bring down the practical message on bring down the cost of living is correct. And there are other things going on within the digital divide. They may not take a minute, a month. But Trevor, this country is going through a transition to greater heights. This transition has to have some little pain. But in the fullness of time, in a few years to come, you will appreciate that William Ruto and his administration, while seeing further than some of us have been imagining.
All right.
And that is what I think about it.
Thank you so much for making time. We've run out of time, Honorable Kirwa.
But you see, it's also very unkind when my good professor makes certain allegations, who reminds us about the elections that they won. We never talk about it every day. It is they who remind us that they won fair and squarely. So can you stop reminding us? Do what Kenyans gave you the mandate to do.
All right. That's what we'll leave it for now. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for that conversation. We're taking a quick break here on Monday Report. When we come back, we still have a lot more to run by you, all right? So don't go too far.